Chuck, one of the problems that we see in the market is just the perception that these devices are very costly. And how do we get training, bring the training down and give it, broaden the access to the training? There's a lot of departments, smaller departments, less well funded. Is there a way of bringing the standard of training down into different technologies that we have today? And how does that how does that blend into a training program?
So the bottom line is, on first pass, yes, they are expensive. If you compare it to any collision that takes place, and if you can prevent that collision, you've paid for 10 of these by the time you pay out on a collision. But there's also an aspect to it that the training is going to reduce liability, it's going to pay for itself in the long run, as well as increase and improve community relations and community perception and officers' attitudes and actually save lives. Not only of citizens, but of officers as well. Because crashes, you know the statistics, Bill, crashes account for almost as many deaths in officers. Just last year is kind of an exception, but every year almost the same a number of lives are lost of officers through crashing and through driving as it is in actual shootings and knifings and stabbings and things like that. So we know that there's a great application for it. But sometimes it's difficult to envision how would you put this into your program, into your system. I said earlier, our intent with simulation is not to replace the EVOC course. EVOC for us is Emergency Vehicle Operation course or operation training. So what that does is that gives you the real physical dynamics of the vehicle. You're going around on a track, you do whatever speeds your department has you practice. But when it comes to, and those are those motor skills that you're training. But when it comes to the fine motor skills of talking on a radio while you're operating a vehicle, while you're driving fast, while you're checking intersections, all that multi-management of what it takes to drive into emergency response or pursuit, that's done on a simulator. So let's say you have an EVOC program right now. Almost every training program, whether it's high speed or low speed, because the low speed you do in your back parking lot and you basically back up and you pull into a T intersection and turn around, it's very low keyed. Either one of those, if you took a simulator and you have multiple stations, right? You have a station for the backing, you have a station for the T intersection, you have a station for the pursuit, you have a station to run around the track, you have one station where another vehicle, another instructor runs with you or tries to intercept you. When I see those trainings taking place, there's one student in that car driving and one instructor, and there's 4 to 8 others, sometimes 16 others sitting on a bench someplace watching. Well, watching is not as good of training as being involved with hands-on practical application training, which is what simulation is. So in that case, and with the vitals, the virtual instructor, you could have those students in another room driving the simulator. They could be driving your track if you want. You could build your track and put it in there, and they drive the course, so now they know your track before they get out with an actual live instructor on the EVOC course. So that would reduce your time on EVOC.
So the simulator can pretend to act as the instructor in these smaller tasks that they're...
We call it self-led or self-paced. So what you can do with vitals is, you see these check marks. I as the instructor can walk you through these, or you as the student could go up and go, well, I've got a red here, I need to check that box. You click on the box, everything comes up, the policy, everything that has to do with that box, whether it was speed threshold or whatever it was, and you can go through, you can react to that, you can respond to that, click redrive, go back, redrive it, drive it again, have no red, you're done, you pass, you send it on to a central location, to a central instructor or supervisor. So it can act as a station to complement your EVOC training or your slow speed training. Take backing. A lot of people feel like you can't train backing on the simulator because you turn around and there's no screen here. Some first responders don't even realize that in advanced simulations, such as transit, trucking, military, they have screens behind them that they can look at. And we have this. We have the technology to put a backup camera in here. How do you train to use a backup camera? Where do you do that at? If backing is your liability that you want to reduce, come check out the simulator and see how we could train on that, and see if it's not better training than just simply going to the back lot and driving around. It's up to you. Like I said, we're not trying to replace EVOC. High speed, that stuff can only be done in a car, on a course. So you could use the simulator as an additional station during your EVOC training. You could use a simulator to reduce the downtime of students watching other students drive in a vehicle. A lot of people will say, well, the simulator, you can only get one student. It's a bottleneck. You can only one student at a time. That's all you can do on a track. And if you take your student to instructor ratio on a course, on a track, you have it's the same bottleneck. There's no difference. So you could put this in as a station. There's another concept as well, and it's called a part task trainer. So we would call this simulator a full task trainer. You can do everything on it. It's got all the bells and whistles, everything. The radio, the MDT, the sirens, everything's on it. Everything you can think of is on it. The picture-in-picture camera. But then they have a part task trainer, which is more similar to this when it's a desktop and we're going through the scenarios. We could be answering questions or quizzes. There's a desktop steering control, and you could actually drive the situation, drive the scenarios, but you're being tested on an intersection, on a policy. When I come to this policy, what does my speed need to be, right? Maybe you don't have as good a control on this steering wheel as you would on that one, or for sure in the real car, but that's not what we're not testing how well you turn the steering wheel. That's EVOC.
You're isolating some of those skills.
We're isolating judgment and decision-making skills that can be done on a computer before you ever get to the track, before you ever go to the field. This computer could be at your substation. It could be placed off-site at a regional site. It could be put in a trailer and driven to a location and left there for 3 days, and throughout the day everybody comes through and does their training and works through that. They get their certificate, they get their pass of their quiz or whatever you put in as your department, because these are your policies, your curriculum. We have curriculum, but it's your policy, your curriculum of whatever you choose to use. And then they could advance to a full task trainer, which is a simulator like this that could be located either at a regional site through the community college or through your main office area, and the officers could travel to that location to do their final training or their most advanced training. They could do it that way. Or you could have it in a trailer again, and they would drive to your location, and you could take that full task trainer to that location, and officers would be at their site. When I trained way back in the day at our site, we had our 2 simulators in a room at the main station, and what I would do is I would go in on night shift, and work the night shift, and I would pull the officers right off of the street into the simulator. We would do our 4 hours of training, and then we'd send them back out. So only one person had to change their schedule. That was the instructor. But all the officers, they stayed on their schedule. We didn't have to relocate them. We didn't have to, change their shifts and then compensate for them coming back and give them a day off and this. So there's a lot of ways to incorporate full task trainers, part task trainers, all into the same goal of safe driving, which is truly more of a human interaction, of an officer attitude, of de-escalation, of what we are hearing in the contemporary law enforcement today that we want changed. When I drove through intersections, I could go right through intersections. I could not do that today and be successful in law enforcement.
And the tool that you're showing here, the Vitals tool, that essentially can be scaled up or down,
yes,
depending
exactly.
on what the media is, but
sure.
But it basically it follows the technology as well.
Sure, and think of it as any other professional training, right? And almost every professional training I can think of, all the athletes have a coach. But for some reason in law enforcement, we all kind of feel like, oh, we can do this. We don't need training. We don't need driver's training. Everybody drives, right? But the reality is, I do need driver's training, whether I'm a brand new to this, a rookie to this, new to these skills and these requirements and these policies, or if I'm an old veteran. A seasoned veteran needs it as well. We need once in a while someone to come in and go, hey, you got to do, because that's what the yellows are for, right? So within the Vitals, yes, that can self-led and bring you through it and show you and set the standards for you. But remember this too, in simulations training, just like in any other form of training, we don't always want to do 42 items of training in every scenario. Sometimes all I need to do is to practice scan and assessing. Checking left and checking right, center left, center right, center left, center right, and practice that skill so that when I'm on the radio, when that shots are being fired, when that suspect is trying to ram me, when the suspect is running away, I don't fall into tunnel vision and chase that person when today, well, I'm not supposed to be doing that. And that's how we combat it. How do we make these changes, you see, for the law enforcement, contemporary law enforcement today?
Yeah, I think, and maybe just touch on some of the newer technologies coming down the road. You know, we'll keep hearing about virtual reality. Well, this is virtual reality.
Yes.
It just is different is that you've got screens in front of you as opposed to wearing a headset.
Exactly.
How do we transfer this into maybe just being able to wear a headset?
So what's happening in the industry is it seems like most people that say virtual reality or virtual training want the goggles, is what they're looking for. Because their experience with the goggles has been fantastic. Their experience has been, look at the whales, look at how they're moving, look at how close this feels, look at this racetrack. This racetrack is great. I mean, I can look at how I drive on the racetrack. So virtual reality is the screens, it's what we put on the screens, or you can put it in your goggles. We have training, and we've had what you call virtual training with the goggles for years in the military. I mean, the 50 caliber on the reconnaissance mission and the escorts always had a virtual reality and always had a 50 caliber to cover their mission. But it's a trade-off when you get to driving or even force option. There's a trade-off. Initially with force option, it looks fantastic because we can see each other and we can move and it's there. But there's always a trade-off. Some of the trade-off is you're wearing a headset. In many cases you're tethered. Some cases you aren't, but you may be tethered, and there's only so much you can do for replay, and the instructor needs to see what you see while you're training. So take, for example, in the driving, if I put a headset on you, I can't see what you're seeing. But I need to see that, so I need additional screens, or I need another headset to do that. We can accomplish all this. Sure. And I get the concept of the goggles. They look cool, they're there. But when you do the continuum of training and we transfer you from here into this screen or from here into the command center to in command to where a supervisor could take over an entire scene, can you imagine an active shooter scene where you drive up in the simulator and you interact here, and then the commander comes up and takes over, and now they're at multiple, because in command can have unlimited number of stations. You could have the city manager, you could have the fire chief, the police chief, you could have a community representative, anybody you want come into those stations and handle this entire scenario that could last 4 hours, you know, at a site or facility. So all of that, sometimes if you have just the goggles, it can restrict you or limit you. But I get the goggles, I understand the desire. If we could just get that desire, what they see in those goggles, if they could understand that is truly simulation. You see, because what they've done by putting the goggles on is they've put aside all of their paradigms about simulators, and they said, this is great. And now they're looking at it saying, wow, this can work, which is, you know, what we've been trying to share and tell for years, because that's how flight is. Flight discovered this years ago. Simulation works.
Great. Well, appreciate all your insights and your helping us understand simulation and driver training as it applies into law enforcement, and touching a little bit on pursuits and
de-escalation, and you know, the human liability fact. What I believe right now is being demanded by our communities is to change the human aspect, the human interaction aspect of law enforcement. It's not so much the policies. We're not getting rid of our guns. They're just saying to treat people differently, to look at situations differently, to have different options to situations, and break some of those paradigms that I was taught way back in the day in law enforcement. And I believe, this is my opinion, is truly effective change comes from truly effective training.
And there's really now, especially particularly today, that there's really a case to be spending more on training.
We should be investing on training. It's funny you mention that, because you take professional teams, professional sports teams, they'll train 6 days a week for one afternoon on Sunday. We go a whole year without any training, with games every single day, every single night. Officers out there, there's probably, 1 million officers in this country? They're doing a fantastic job. 99% of great work. Applaud them, respect them, really good stuff. There's a 1% out there that's not doing it quite right. That's how we find our 1%. This is how we predict our 1%. We need to do something about that, but we need more training. Unfortunately, when budget cuts come along, what's the first thing to cut? Training. And yet training is our investment into our future, our investment for better behavior, better prediction of performance and we elevate our performance. It reduces liability. It's just it's a money saver, to be honest with you.
It is.
It really is.
It's an
But it
investment.
does. But it saves lives. It saves lives.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.